All right, all right. We are live, another Trella live this week. Um, New topics, another special guest. For those of you that are just joining, my name is Aja of Trella. For those of you that haven't been around for a few weeks and are surprised that we have special guests, surprise, we have special guests now. About 3 weeks ago, um, I, s- I had our first guest, and I forgot how enjoyable it is to have a conversation with someone that you know I'm learning from, or trying to get some info, trying to understand the topic better. And if this person knows about it, what better way than to talk to them and get to know about it than over a live, and at the same time create content. So it's almost like killing two birds, one stone. Learn something, create content. So we're going to be doing a bit more of that today. So I'm going to just give the algorithm and all the notifications just a few more, just a minute or two, to let people know that we're here, so we can get some eyes in the room before we get started. So what we're going to do today is we're going to, when we get started, we're going to talk about the plant that you see over my shoulder. For those of you that have been watching the Raspberry Parfait Grow Trial, I'll give you an update on how she's doing. And then we're going to intro in our guest, Miss Glennisha Morgan of Decolonize Canna. All right, stick with us. All right, let's get started. For those of you that are here, thank you. For those of you that are watching on recording, appreciate it. Anybody watching, click that subscribe or and that like button. Greatly appreciate it. We already our guest, the guest came in early, nice and early, to check out technical difficulties. So Glenisha, thank you for that. And while Glenisha and I were preparing, I was talking about, how some of our content is restricted. So if you could do us a favor by clicking on those likes and letting people know that we're out here, we really appreciate that. But today, first, before we bring in Glenisha and talk about terpenes, which is the topic for today, I wanted to give those of you that have been watching this progress of our grow trial an update. We started growing one plant sideways above my desk in my office. Actually, that's how we started this grow trial, and we only had about 33 inches of height in that grow space, and wanted to demonstrate how Trella Grow LST, which is our low stress training device, will help you grow a tall plant in a short space, also create a nice even canopy, and make it really simple and easy for you to do it. So the grow trial that you're looking at over my right here is that same plant that you're seeing on the screen. But let me just take a step back for those of you that are like, what the heck are you talking about, growing a plant over your desk? It's very you need a visual for that, so let me give you a visual if I can. This is the plant. Let me go back and pause. So this is the same plant that's over my shoulder. Only one plant right there. That's her in her very beginning stages, very early vegetation phase. And what we're doing is we're leaning that plant sideways, and we're going to continue to lean her sideways as she grows. And eventually she'll just grow sideways down a pathway, and that will help to hold the height. So that whole pathway is about 4 feet long. So we basically grew this one plant 4 feet in length, and then we let all of the side branches stretch up and flower and up towards the light. So you're seeing the end result of that plant growing all the way sideways. If you're wondering what that looks like, I'll show you that next. Here is the whole kind of, cross section. Let me go back and pause for you again. There we go. Boom. So this is the same plant again, Raspberry Parfait. You just saw her started out before, but now she's grown sideways about 4 feet in length. And we just took off that top kind of netting and paneling so that all the branches can start stretching up towards the light. So when during the stretch phase, so this is I call this my veg station. This is where I will veg a plant. And then I take this plant and put it in my flowering station, which is behind me right now. In my flowering station, I have 48 inches of height. So I have only about a foot and a half more. And that's to account for the stretch. Every cannabis plant stretches when they're going into their flowering phase. So I needed to account for that. So now she is in this grow tent. She's going through the stretch phase, and she is now in just straight bud production, trichome production, terpene production. All of the good stuff is happening right now. And she smells amazing. I made the mistake of I was going on a trip this weekend to New York and rushing around trying to get all my stuff ready, and I needed to grab some tools, some supplies to take on my trip with me as I was doing some Trella related work for, some of you that have been watching, you know that Duchess is in Brooklyn and she's doing a grow trial. So I was getting ready to go down there to do some stuff with her plant, and I happened to just brush up against my plant while I was taking a measurement with a tape measure in there. And I walked upstairs and it was just reeking off of me. My wife could smell me for like, you know, she could smell me. And she didn't have to even be close up on me to smell it. So she's already starting to kick off some really nice flavors and smells. And I realized to myself, I don't even really know what the terpene profile is on this Raspberry Parfait. I mean, I actually kind of looked at the decision to grow this particular strain was more based on testing what the limitations of our technology. So it was more along the lines of, let's get a tall plant that we can grow in a short space. And Raspberry Parfait is known to be very tall. So that is basically, one of the main reasons why we picked. And then also, I just, like the name and I like raspberries. So, so I decided to go with Raspberry Parfait. Now it's time for me to learn a little bit more about terpenes. While I was running the streets in New York this weekend, hanging with some people in the industry and learning more about how to identify quality cannabis and how to, when I'm smoking it, what to look out for in regards to taste to find chemicals. I'm also learning that I also need to know more about how to understand terpenes and how they're going to impact me and my high and how I consume. I haven't put any energy into this, and as I mentioned on a previous uh, you know uh, live, if you caught that, what I like to do when I bring people on is to find someone who can help me learn, so that we're all learning together. So um, Glennisha and I have connected on social media maybe about not too long ago, maybe just a couple of months ago or so, and I've been following her content. And what got me to actually following her content was all the terpene related stuff that Glennisha was putting out. So I'm just going to bring that up real quickly so you can see what I'm talking about, particularly. Hold on here as I switch things around. So this is one of the Terpy Tuesday posts that I first saw that caught my eye, and I went, here's someone doing content specifically on the terps. Let me follow and let me engage so that I can make sure that it comes up on my feed so I don't miss more. And then, I think what happened is, I'll bring you in, Glennisha, and you can share your side of this experience too. But we started seeing each other's content and supporting each other by sharing, and then the next thing I knew, I was like, I really want to learn something. Maybe Glennisha would be happy to join and share a little bit with me and with the audience. So without further ado, here she is. And let me remove this so that we can all see you better. There we go.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you for joining in. So while you were sitting backstage listening to my monologue, so you can jump in. But I would like, I guess, for the audience to understand what it takes to connect with people across social media. Like, how do you decide to get together? It really can just be as simple as understanding that there's similarities and then reaching out, and hopefully people are nice and pleasant and want to engage. So I'll let you share a little bit more from your perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Funny enough, I've actually made some really great friends across different spectrums in the digital space and online. And one of the things that is extremely important when on social media and in digital spaces is like engaging, right? I mean, I know we have some people that like to, I guess, quote unquote, lurk or just browse and not really interact. But I think especially if you are a content creator, or even if you have a brand or a company, anything that you're trying to market is so important to, engage. And that's, commenting on other people's content, sharing it, also, having different conversations. And it's a great way to network, meet people again, across different genres, and to connect. And I think especially in the cannabis community where, here in the States, right? It's not legal federally, so every state is kind of doing its own thing. But you get to also learn, from a lot of different people and seeing what's going on in different states and different communities.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we engaged and reached out and that you were able to come on. While I was doing some preparation for today's show and digging a little bit more into your profile, I don't know if you don't mind, I wanted to bring up your website if that's okay, so that we could see a little
Sure.
bit more about you. Let me get that to work. All right. So I think I did know that the decolonized Canada was kind of a content creation, like one of several things that you do. But when I looked at this history, I was like, wow, as with most people, there's layers and there's complexity and there's other things that people can do. So can you just talk a little bit more about like what you did before you got into cannabis, and a little bit about your background and what your passion is?
Yeah, of course. So I've been an editor, writer, and journalist for the past 15 years, covering everything from business to entertainment, also queer issues, women's issues, cannabis, as well as writing essays about my truth. I'm also currently a communications manager for an abolitionist nonprofit here locally in Detroit. And I also briefly had a stint as an educator teaching high school English. So the bulk of my career has been in media and communications as well as education.
Excellent. Could talk a little bit more about the high school experience teaching English in high school, because I remember me as a high schooler for English, and I was very STEM focused, so I neglected some of the other arts, and English was one of them. So I have a weird perspective of English high school, but how was it from your perspective teaching, and did you enjoy it? What was it like?
To be quite frank, I would say yes and no.
Mm,
Um,
yep.
it was definitely a great experience for me. I definitely learned a lot. I enjoyed connecting with, my scholars and, obviously teaching them and learning many different things about them as well as myself. But I found the actual education system was sort of hard to work within, and I didn't really feel like I just didn't necessarily have the support that was needed. And I think that's for if you talk to a lot of educators across the board, unfortunately, it's kind of rough, and depending on where you are. But I enjoyed, teaching English and literature to my high schoolers, who are some of the most just, beautiful and talented, smart and innovative kids that you'll ever meet. Now a lot of them have graduated and they're grown and adults, but it was a cool experience.
Yeah. Do you think any of this, this the you because the name of your Instagram handle is Decolonized Canna. I also think about the educational system is very from a colonizer perspective. Was that an issue for you there too?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It definitely was. I would even say, right, like I ended up teaching high school by going through a program. I'm not even gonna name it, but a
Mhm.
program. And so within that program, like even before I was like interviewing to be placed at a school, I actually got turned down from a lot of schools, and I know like a lot of the main reason was because I wasn't necessarily the type of teacher that was about just like discipline and getting kids, to conform and pretty much just, obey and be obedient. I found that a lot of schools were more so worried about kind of just creating, robots and kids that, can just do whatever it is that they're told to do. And so, that was something that I definitely hated.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I've got a 2.5-year-old son, and I'm not really excited about any of the options that I see around right now. So it's almost like a hybrid approach is needed. Um, but nonetheless, on back to the topic of cannabis, and also for the audience that's listening, Glennisha, you're currently in Detroit. Are you from Detroit
Yeah,
originally?
I'm a native Detroiter, born and raised. I have lived like all over the country,
Hmm.
throughout my adult life, but I'm born and raised from right
Gotcha.
here in Detroit.
Yep. So, when did you decide, or has it been kind of like a gradual decision to get into the cannabis space and to start publicly, I think, doing this education and content creating, etc.
Funny enough, it was actually when I was teaching, I was under a lot of stress.
Mm,
And that during my time teaching is when I started consuming cannabis a lot more consistently and a lot more frequently than I had been.
mm,
So, prior to that, it was, kind of sporadic, but I often found myself after work, leaning on cannabis to de stress. Also, at the time, I was teaching in Lawrence, Massachusetts, but I was living in Nashua, New Hampshire.
mm,
And I actually had some health issues going on. I've had endometriosis as well as ovarian cysts and fibroids, and so unfortunately my doctor at that time, who was in New Hampshire, refused to prescribe me the pain medication that my original primary care physician back home in Michigan had been prescribing me.
mm,
And so, to be, quite frank, I felt like the doctor was pretty racist and kind of viewed me as if I was pill seeking. And it's like, no, like this is actually what my doctor back home, as you can see in my records, had
mm, mm,
prescribed me. And so when the physician didn't want to prescribe me the medicine that I was using to manage my pain, I started, turning to cannabis and,
mm,
learning more, teaching and learning more about it. And so back then I started my Instagram page, The Colonized Canna. I think that was like back in 2016. And initially, and because I was in the education space, I never like showed my face. I was kind of,
mm,
just hiding behind posts. And once I actually quit teaching and got out of the educational space, and felt, a bit more comfortable, that's when I decided, okay, I kind of want to take this to a different level,
mm,
sort of come from behind the screen and like, hiding and taking content to, just a different level. And as well, back then when I first started, like Instagram wasn't doing reels, but over time we moved to more video content. And
mm.
so, the page has gradually grown since then.
Yeah. Very nice, and that's a hard thing to do. I mean, it's been years of Trella. I think we didn't start until 2018 or something like that. But it's just been, ugh. and then you, and then your page can get disrupted because of a meta guideline or something like that. So, congratulations for getting your page to grow. Yeah, that
Thank you.
yeah. So because you have that background, in media and writing, um, do you, so I think that's kind of a great skill set to bring into this. But how do you handle more of the like the video content, because that's not written communication, that's very
Mhm.
like, are you, and you seem to be very comfortable with it. Is that something that you've always been comfortable with?
I would say yes and no. Funny
Okay.
enough, even being a journalist, I definitely have social anxiety and can be shy,
Hmm.
depending on the situation. However, in my career, the bulk of my career has been with writing, but there have been times where I have had to be in front of the camera. And
Mm,
I've also done radio.
mm,
So with that, I kind of treat it as if like it is work or a job. And just like throughout my media career, when it's time to be on and lights, camera, action, it's, just time to sort of put all of that anxiety behind and do what you have to do. But
Yeah, yeah.
it does come in handy because, over the course of my career, I've been able, to, write and edit, as well as, video editing and editing written stuff as well. And so all of that, actually comes in handy.
Got you, got you. Now, are there any pieces that you've written lately that you're like, I think, really proud of? And maybe because I'll add to this, maybe because it's a chance when you finally got to write about something that you really wanted to write about.
I would say not necessarily recently. I am currently working on something. I'm currently actually working on a memoir, and so that's very personal, but it's not public or published or anything right now. But I will probably say one thing that I definitely was proud of, and it wasn't written, but I ended up doing a Facebook Live segment where I got to interview a panel of black folks in the cannabis space here in Michigan at one of my a previous publication that I worked at, and that was probably like one of those moments where I was so happy to be covering something that I was extremely excited about. And and knowledgeable about, and just happy to kind of be able to cover something in my career and not feel like I have to, hide about my passion and excitement for cannabis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And is that I think that's pinned on your Instagram, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'll go back and check that out, make sure I didn't miss that for sure. But going back to something else you talked about, you mentioned cysts, ovarian cysts. I have fibroid cysts as well, and I've kind of like struggled a little bit myself with my diet and trying to figure out what I can change in my diet. And I don't, and I've figured out how to reduce it to the point where it's not as aggravating and not as disruptive. But it can always be better. So there's more I can learn. From a cannabis perspective, talk to me a little bit about what you learned and what helped you with your situation.
Yeah, so one of the things that I learned, and I would probably say it's a combination of both trying to treat and find just a little bit of relief from the fibroids and cysts and endometriosis, but as well as migraines. And then I also have PMDD. So for me, what I found is that any strain any strain that pretty much is high in myrcene, right, which is great for your pain relief. It's also really great as an antioxidant, and so muscle tension as well. If I'm, cramping a lot and I'm in a lot of pain, I'm gonna go, lean towards something with that in it. I've also found and learned while I did my first home grow was that for some reason, purple plants also were really great for pain management. And I haven't like fully finished researching it, but what I'm kind of getting the gist of is that, right, a lot of purple plants tend to actually be high in myrcene. And so I think that's what the connection is with the purple plants specifically that have been helpful. And then I also learned from a good friend of mine who's also in the cannabis space and has a cannabis business that when using edibles, right, dark chocolate is also really great for
That
pain
explains.
relief. It's
That
also, it's tasty, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
especially if you're on your cycle. I don't know about anybody else. I tend to crave chocolate anyway. So it's like if you lean towards that dark chocolate, you get that, satisfy the craving, but also help yourself to release some pain.
Yeah, I do enjoy a nice dark chocolate with like 85 to 90%. Oh, perfect. But and then you mentioned, the color aspect of it, things that are purple have it being more, key for myrcene. It just makes me think about those visual cues that ancestors or animals use to understand what they can what they can eat to help make them feel better. So yeah, it's so interesting how obvious sometimes this stuff is for us, and we just have been so disconnected from it and so removed that you could walk down your through a park and not understand that you're walking you're walking past medicine, or you're walking past something that could help you with your headache right now. You just walk by it.
Right. Right. Every day. Seriously. Like I can't remember. Oh, I went to get ice cream yesterday, and
Hmm.
one of my another favorite herbs of mine is lavender.
Hmm.
And I was, on my way to the ice cream spot, and there was just like lavender growing wildly, and I'm like, I want to come back and like,
Yeah,
take
that is it.
some. But it was just so dope, to see that. And even too, like, I know we often tend to hate dandelions, in
Hmm.
our grass, and we look at them as weeds, but it's like dandelions are also really medicinal,
Hmm.
and it's something that we just look at as, weeds. And I know they tend to like take over the lawn, but it's great.
Yeah, yeah. I actually have a dandelion tattoo on the back of my leg.
Oh, wow.
Yep, yep, yep,
That's
yep.
cool.
Because for me it represented something that people think is doesn't have value, but 100% does. So it's
Yeah.
still, yeah. Just that's the reason why I picked it. Um, yeah. Wow. So myrcene, well, that's good because the raspberry parfait that we're growing has some myrcene in it. I did write down like the top four
Yeah.
that I saw in the Raspberry Parfait. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at it because I only sent it to you this morning. So if you haven't, I understand. But if you
Yeah,
have,
I did.
what can I expect with the Raspberry Parfait? What do you think?
Yeah, so I saw that, like the most dominant terpene in the raspberry parfait is the terpenoline.
Hmm.
And so we know, right, with that, that is something that is great for soothing the central nervous system,
Mm.
right? That terp is also really great for insomnia relief, as well as it's an anti-cancer, antibacterial, and antioxidant. And so we also know that it has a lot of caryophyllene as well. And so that's something that's really great if you have autoimmune issues, or if you have arthritis, or gastro issues, right? It's
Hmm.
very gastroprotective. And then, of course, with the myrcene, that's also anti-inflammatory. It's also great for pain. Then we have the linalool, which is also anti depressant and great for anti stress and anxiety.
Hmm.
So to me, right, when I look at this terpene profile, it is something that I would love to actually try
Oh,
to help
cool.
me with my PMDD symptoms, or
Hmm.
a lot of the stuff that I go through when I'm on my cycle. I would also say, for instance, if someone has like any sort of gastro issues, like maybe GERD, or
Mm.
maybe if you also have acid reflux, right? Because of the caryophyllene in it.
Okay.
That's something I might, want to try it for.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I feel like you know I well, two things. One is someone told me that if you go by smell, and when I smelt it on my arm and I got that like immediate like, whoo, this seems like something that's good for me. I feel like that was my confirmation,
Yeah.
confirmation right there. Is there any truth to that? You think?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing too, right? Like, okay, one of my favorite terpenes is limonene. And
Hmm.
that's the one that's very citrusy, and it smells just like a lot of times a lemon, right? And that
Hmm.
could be found in super lemon haze, or other strains like sour diesel.
Hmm.
And so when you smell it, right, even anything citrusy, it's kind of like refreshing
Hmm.
and all of that. And so going off of that, that's great for, to boost your mood or stress relief. Or if
Hmm.
I want to, work on something and kind of need to focus,
Hmm.
right? But again, it's once you smell that, the different aromas and the scents, it can kind of sometimes let you know, what it's helpful for.
Right. I did have a friend though this weekend tell me that limonene gives her migraine headaches, so she can't do
Mm,
any strains with it. Um, but so I guess it's important to know, because there have been times where I've consumed something and a little bit later in that day I'm like, I have a headache, and I normally don't have that headache. I feel like that's kind of a byproduct of it. So I
hmm.
wonder, I need to start. I've never really written a journal of what I consume, which
Yeah.
is something I really need to do. But I have, so all of my journaling is dedicated to like data and tech stuff. So
Yeah, it's really good to document. I'll
yeah.
be honest, I'm super nerdy and I'm also hyper anal, but
Mhm.
when it comes to my wellness journey, something that I do daily is like I pretty much document everything from, what I ate in the morning, down to, different strains or, whatever I had that I'm consuming, so that if it is a day, let's say that I have a migraine or I notice some new whatever thing going on with my body, I can sort of go back and say, well, wait a minute, you know what? On this day, I ate this, I
Mhm.
consumed this, or I didn't do this, and try to, figure out what exactly could be the issue or what might have caused something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, since you have that journal, have you ever identified? Because sometimes people will say, well, you get a different response from cannabis if you're dehydrated or you didn't get enough sleep. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Um, I will probably say if I am right, like sometimes I do get bouts of insomnia.
Mm,
And if I am sort of on this, unfortunate road where my sleep is just completely off and I'm not haven't been sleeping well for a few days.
mhm,
It does not probably for the most part, like it doesn't matter about me smoking indica, right? That's
mhm.
probably not going to do it
It's not
for
gonna
me or
work.
get it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so, in that case, I might actually want to consume something, an edible or something for that matter. Um, but I guess that's about the only experience that I've kind of had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense when you say like if you need to really get through that in that deep sleep period, insomnia, you go for edible. For me, it's a tincture.
hmm,
If I don't, if I what I like to do is to have a couple of puffs of flour to get me to sleep, and then I also do tincture, which helps me get through that like 3 a.m. time period where my brain likes to sometimes wake up and start the day, which I struggle with because I'm like maybe I'm supposed to be doing that. But then I don't feel so much. I don't feel that way in the morning when I don't get that sleep. So I'll do tincture to get through it. And my understanding is that the way that your body processes flour inhaling through your lungs versus getting into your bloodstream through your you know intestinal system, um, it it changes the impact dramatically. So how's that been for you? You feel the same way?
oh yeah, absolutely. I would say too, especially being someone who utilizes cannabis, consistently and pretty much almost daily, I definitely have to switch it up.
Mm,
And sometimes it's, not consuming cannabis every day, but I need to tap into CBD and some of those other,
mm,
cannabinoids. I know too, like when people tend to talk about, like taking a tolerance break, which I've recently learned. I typically usually try to take some from time to time, and it typically happens right after my cycle because that's when my consumption is much higher due
mm,
to the amount of pain, that
mm,
I'm in.
mm,
But like I said, coming off, I might, I'm trying to go on a tolerance break. But what I've recently learned, sometimes during that tolerance break, after about 3 days where I have like nothing in my system, then I'm dealing with ailments where it's like, well, you should have just had your medicine. But like seriously, it's like
mhm,
if I was
mhm.
taking another sort of medication or something prescribed, you wouldn't just stop taking it.
You wouldn't do it
But
that way, yeah.
yeah, but so during those moments, it's like, well, let me actually try something with, like I said, CBD.
Mhm.
Or maybe if I need trouble sleeping, instead of just going for THC, let me try something with CBN.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
instead. Yeah.
yeah. And I do like I will kind of ebb and flow. I'll not consume for a few days, and usually like if I have to travel somewhere, I but definitely like international travel, I'm like, well, I don't have my stuff, so we're just gonna just gonna have to see what happens, and maybe I can kind of connect where I am, but it's not always the case. So you just kind of go without, and I do find that the impact when I start to consume again is definitely different. Um, but then if I don't do it for too long, I get pain, my knee starts to bother me, like just weird things start coming back that I didn't have a problem with before. So I feel you on that. I feel like,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. So, Raspberry Parfait seems like she's going to be a winner. Would you? And you said you grow now. What are you currently growing?
Well,
Or are you
unfortunately, I'm not currently growing, but
okay?
during when COVID hit and during the pandemic, that was the year 2020 that I decided to roll the dice with, home growing.
Hmm.
And I ended up growing about, I don't know, like maybe 6 to 8 plants.
Hmm.
And I ended up growing cherry wine, super lemon haze,
Hmm.
and I actually had a mystery seed, which to this day I wish I knew what it was. But the mystery seed was this beautiful purple plant that I ended up growing and helped me so much with my migraines. But I did it outdoor
Hmm.
in my backyard on my patio, and it was such a cool experience. Like I would literally go out every day and rotate my plants with the way that the sun moved.
Yeah.
Um, but it was such a cool experience.
Would you do it again if you had? I guess it's more because when you maybe your lifestyle just doesn't account for you to be able to take care of them. But
Yeah,
you miss it?
absolutely. Absolutely. To be honest, I'm quite sad that I'm not growing. Unfortunately, like I just moved from a house to an apartment, so it
Mhm.
doesn't really allow me to grow in the way that I used to. But previously when I had a house in the yard, like not only did I have cannabis, but I've always pretty much kept a garden every summer. So I
Mm.
was also growing food and herbs and things like
So
that.
you
But
missed the
I miss
garden.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
interesting enough, right? Like even watching, people like yourself and your company, I've always, to be honest, have been intimidated about growing indoors because of the
Mm.
lights and the timers and just, a lot of stuff that I've read and hearing from other people. And I guess just because my first, go at it was outdoor, but I'm a little intimidated with indoors, but I would love to try growing indoors one day.
Yeah, I mean, it can be it. I know people make it seem intimidating because it's got like this unfortunate like bro like energy to it, like whoa, like machinery, know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. It could be very simple. And I even say to people, if you're starting out for the first time, keep it as simple as possible. And you don't need a dehumidifier. You may,
Mhm.
but you don't need it just yet. Like find out if you need it before you buy it. Um, so we put together this like 6 week grow your own challenge to help people learn. And I still have like access to all that content. So when you're ready and you want like I mean, if you're a very organized person, you like to follow step by step guide, hit me up because we might have something that might help you with that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
love that.
But yeah, look, I had to take a break from growing for about a year while I moved to a new location, and then we went on some travel, and I just couldn't. I was like, by the time I put my grow room together, I have to break it back down. So I'm just gonna take a year off. I took a year off, and this has been my first season back, so I'm really happy to have an indoor grow. I also have an outdoor grow, and I've got some okra and some Scotch bonnet peppers that I've been playing around with because I've never grown those before. I just want to experience what those are like. um but it's been fun, and I also think it's difficult to really be successful in the cannabis industry if you haven't touched the plant. What do you think?
Hmm. Well, I honestly, unfortunately, can't really speak to that because I'm not, I'm just a self-taught person who
Mhm.
loves, educating other people and trying to help other folks and creating content around it. So I I I actually would love to know how people who are in the industry but aren't actually touching the plant, like how they're faring out. I think what I will say though is that, right, like I know a handful of folks who have edible businesses, or
Mm.
folks who are also content creators, or that work for dispensaries, and they've seemed to forge pretty decent careers. Like on that one panel that I hosted, there was a black lawyer, that I ended up interviewing, who works for a dispensary. And that's one
Mm.
of those things that I kind of feel like you don't necessarily think about, but it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, if you're in the industry and you have a company, you definitely are going to need a lawyer,
Yep.
so you don't necessarily have to touch the plant or even love it,
Yep. Yep.
to do something like that.
I guess I should clarify my statement. It really is more along the lines of if you're producing a cannabis product
Mm-hmm.
that comes from a plant and that's what your business is, then I think if you have never really grown the plant, don't understand the complexities, and even don't consume it, it's really, I think, hard to connect with your market and your customer base the way that you maybe really could. So that's my rephrase.
I think now that you rephrase that, I think
Mhm.
I could definitely see that because, right, I would even say as a consumer, before I moved back home, right, I used to live in Las Vegas.
Mm.
And to be honest, out of all the states that I've lived in, they all are now, legal.
Mhm.
But I had the best experience as a consumer in Las Vegas. I
Why is
found
that?
that a lot of the bud tenders there, because they were knowledgeable.
Hmm.
And to be honest, I have to give a lot of credit to my knowledge about terpenes from my experience living in Las Vegas and shopping. But I think what might also be a key point is that I was a medical patient.
Hmm.
So I think, and I think definitely if you are serving the medical community, even though, cannabis is medicinal regardless, of whether or not you enjoy it, but you should be knowledgeable. But again, out there, like that's how I actually learned to start shopping by the terpene profile. And
Mm.
then once I moved back to Michigan and started going to dispensaries and I'm asking about terps, like unfortunately there were some people that was just looking at me like, huh? And they're like, no, I don't know anything.
Mm.
And even now, I've been, back living in Michigan now for 5 years. There is only, I will say, one dispensary that I noticed they used to have like a screen with like the terpenes playing on a loop
Hmm.
while you shop. But there's not too many places that when you go in and I'm like, hey, can you find me something with, that's leading with limonene or something with myrcene? And they're
Hmm.
like, oh, I don't know my terps.
Mm. So they'd
And
have to hook it up. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Man, did
So
you did you have a favorite dispensary in Vegas and um or I mean, I would love to know the name of the one in Detroit. Feel free to shout them out. But because I'm going out to Vegas hopefully in November. And
okay.
when I was there, I got it. I went. I was there maybe about that was 2019, so about 4 years ago.
Mhm.
There was a dispensary that was the only like place that had a social consumption lounge,
Mhm.
um, run by our indigenous cousins. I can't remember the name of the dispensary though. I don't know if you can remember, but
I can't. But that sound. I think that must have been recently because I know back then the lounges, like the law hadn't even passed about the lounges yet.
right. And
Um,
because they were on a reservation, they were on their own land, they were able to
oh,
do a consumption lounge. So it was pretty cool. I can find
that's
it
what's
again.
up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was a nice experience, a really nice experience. Um,
Oh,
but no, let's get back into the terpenes then. Like for people that are listening and maybe wondering, so what's the big deal about terpenes? I just only look at THC and CBD,
mhm.
which a lot of my friends still do. So I'm, I need to help educate them. So what should we be telling people like that? Like what's a very easy way to explain to someone that they need to pay attention to the terpenes?
I would say a very easy way is if you don't like being deceived or lied to, shop by the terpenes. Something that I'm not sure if a lot of people actually realize or know, but unfortunately, there are some dispensaries and companies that are purposefully inflating the THC percentages, I guess, in a fraudulent way. And they're purposely increasing them because they know that some people aren't necessarily as knowledgeable, and they're coming in and say, hey, give me the thing with the highest percentage, or what's going to get me the highest. And they're playing on that. And so, they're tinkering with those percentages and using it as a marketing ploy. And, I would just also say that it's, sure, like if you're looking to just get lifted and get elevated, then like, cool, more power to you. But if you're more interested in like an overall experience, how you want to feel, and if you are consuming cannabis, medicinally in a conscious way, then you can go off of that. So you can know, like, hey, this particular profile might elevate my mood. It might help to, decrease my anxiety or my stress. It might also help with this. Or this might be more of a body high, whereas this particular, certain strain with the terpene profile might be more of a head high. So it's also too about, that experience. Or if you're someone that's like, oh, I don't want to be stuck on the couch, you might not want to go for something with myrcene then, if you don't want to be stuck on the couch. Or for even with like some sativas, and stuff like that, if you're somebody that you're already sort of like hype or up and you don't have a problem, doing what you need to do, then you might need, something with more of a balance, so.
Yeah. So it's really finding that terpene. So one, that's a really good, that's one of the few areas where they've been able to play with the numbers. So you're going to get clearer, pure data. And if you can figure out which ones work best for you, that's really a great, one of the first things you need to be looking at is not the name, not the THC, it's the terpene profile. Does it meet my needs? And I can trust those numbers more than I can trust some of the others.
Yeah, like you can't go wrong with the terpene profile and the actual science, of the strain. But again, when numbers are being manipulated, it's like, who wants to deal with that?
No, I understand that. In regards to the numbers, so like if I'm looking at the terpene profile and I want to know, I'm trying to delineate one versus another. Like I got two strains and they both have myrcene in them. And one might say it's got like 10 or, well, I don't know, what's the quantity that they measure in? Anyway, let's say one is 10 and the other one is 5. Is that a huge difference? Is that by a factor of like, how important is the actual amount? Because you don't want it to get washed out with all the other terpenes. Is that even a possibility?
Yeah, right. Like let's even talk about your Raspberry Parfait, right? And I saw in the profile that it only has like 0.34 milligrams of linalool in it.
Milligrams, okay.
And we know that that's for sedation, anxiety, anti-anxiety, and anxiety relief and stuff like that. Being that it's so low, you might not get a full relief, as another strain or something that would actually, have more of that particular terpene in it, right? And knowing too that the most dominant terpene that's in that particular plant is the terpinolene. That one is for antioxidants and insomnia relief, right? So we know that that's the most dominant terpene. So even with that, you have, and the full profile is actually has a ton of terpenes, which, by the way, there's hundreds of terpenes, right? We typically talk about some of the main 4 or 5 or 6 terpenes that we find, but as the numbers get lower and lower, of course you're not going to get the same
Yeah.
amount of effects that you're going to get in whatever terpene is leading in that strain.
It becomes negligible. And I will also wonder if terpenes work together. Like, how would a terpene, because I know like there's some cannabinoids that play well together.
Hmm.
So is it the same with terpenes?
Yeah. Yep, it's the same thing. It's pretty much that whole entourage effect,
Yeah, yeah. The
you
aunt,
know, and that's
get
what,
everybody.
yeah, that's also, you know, what's very important.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, um, I think as people start to get more aware of terpenes, and the profiles start to be more prominent, hopefully the numbers will stay true. But thank you, because I think I need to do more work on journaling my experience, when I'm consuming, so that I can identify the terpenes that I really need to pay attention to. Um, so yeah, thanks a lot, Glenisha. Now, what are you doing for the rest of the year? What's going on in Glenisha's world?
Yeah, so for the rest of the year, I am focusing on creating more creative and captivating content that's also educational. I'm trying
Mhm,
to figure out how to, you know, work with that algorithm and still create content that is educational, that unfortunately, you know, that fortunately doesn't get flagged or dinged with the
mhm,
social media platforms. And then I am also working on launching a community that is built around helping to guide folks around consuming cannabis medicinally consciously. And
mhm,
so when I, you know, talk about that, like as I mentioned earlier, you know, even though we have medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, the
mhm,
government, they really, just being honest, they really don't know diddly for sure.
mhm,
Like they
mhm.
pass these laws and they're not even educated on the plant. And as
Right.
I said, just because we enjoy cannabis does not take away from its medicinal values. Like
Mhm,
it's still
mhm,
there. It's still a, you know, a herb. It's still a very magical and medicinal plant. And so I want to help guide folks who are interested in having more autonomy over their wellness and over
mhm,
their health on how to, you know, utilize this wonderful plant in their lives, but as well as in conjunction with other herbs and other plant medicine. And so you can
excellent.
be on the lookout for that.
I will. I will. When do you think we'll see something? I mean, not to hold you to it, because trust me, I have lots of projects in on my plate, and you have deadlines. But sometimes the universe doesn't give a fuck about your deadlines. So,
Right.
so when do you hope to have this available to people?
I would probably say by fall, and if not, like definitely before winter.
Yeah, yeah, because it's definitely needed. I think I was talking to someone about that. It's like just this weekend. There's no real consumer education out there, from a third party health perspective. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, there's a void. There's a void that needs to be filled. Well, all right, Glenisha. Thank you for joining Trella Live. Thank you for helping me have a better understanding of what I can do to enjoy and consume, and to heal myself better when I'm consuming. I will definitely let you know how the Raspberry Parfait turns out when I have my first hit of that. This plant will, I can zoom in just a little bit so people can see, but she should be ready around mid-September, September 12th, and hopefully I'll be able
Gorgeous.
to consume her by early October, and test it out. Um, but yeah,
I'm
every week.
excited for you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's like, running like a marathon. I'm like, we're on the home stretch, girl. You can do it. We're almost there.
Right.
um, but yeah, thanks a lot for joining us, everybody who stopped in. Wait, before we go, there's some. If you're live and you want to ask a question, please feel free to comment, ask a question about terpenes or whatever it might be. Um, you can do that. And while we do that, I'm going to give people time to do that if they want to. I'm going to show Glenisha's Instagram page again, so that you all know how to find her and what the real true profile is. And it's not, that is not a hack one. So let me just add that. All right. So there we are, decolonized canna. And I believe one of these, which one was it? Was this one? I think was the event that you were talking about,
Yeah, the panel.
the panel. Yep, Black History Month. Nice.
Thank you.
Yep, yep. Well, Glennisha, let's definitely stay in touch. And because I want to see what it is that you put together to help with consumers. I have some people in my circle that could definitely benefit from that. I could benefit from it, obviously. And yeah, let's keep supporting each other and have a good rest of your evening. Um,
For sure. And thank you for having me. And again, I'm excited for you. I can't wait to hear all about Raspberry Parfait and if it actually, helps you target anything. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, she smells like she wants to, so so I'm
that's what's up.
I'm feeling positive about it. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Monday at 7:30 p.m. Join us live then. And all of our recordings are on our YouTube. We're also putting some stuff on a Patreon, so stay tuned for that. If you're a caregiver or a community farmer, which means that you grow for others, not just for yourself and not just to sell, but you grow for someone else to give and to donate, please stay tuned. Please stay tuned because we're looking for 20 growers that match that criteria. And if you want to sign up and do the early bird move and get ahead of the game, you can check us out by looking at the Grow More with Less program at Trella.io. Trella.io. So that's all. That's all we got. All right, y'all. I'm at peace and love. See you next week.